Valencia is a club in crisis. Angry protests on match days, an absent owner, and 7-1 drubbings by rivals. And for fans, there is only one person to blame: owner Peter Lim. In this video, we're going to take a close look at what has gone wrong for the former La Liga champions, and how in the space of 10 years of Lim owning the club, the fans have gone from expecting to get back to the top of the Spanish footballing table to facing a real threat of relegation. So to start with, a bit of background on the club. Formed in 1919, the club have been a staple of Spain's top flight since the 1931-32 season. In that time, the club has won La Liga on 6 occasions, with its most successful period being in the early years of the millennium. During that time, they won the Liga title in the 2001-2002 season, and then followed that up in the 2003-2004 season with another title and a UEFA Cup. A further Copa del Rey victory in the 2007-2008 season meant that it was a golden decade for the club, and of course that left fans confident that it could go on into the future. This was also the period in which work began on a new state-of-the-art stadium that was seen as the next step in Valencia, posing a real threat to the dominance of Real Madrid and Barcelona. However, finances at the club weren't adding up. In the same year as that Copa del Rey win, it was reported that there had been weeks and months where the players had not been paid, and that the club had debts of around 400 million euros. 2 years later, the mounting debt forced the club to sell its star players in David Villa and David Silva to help balance their books. By 2013, half a decade after their last trophy, the club's finances had not improved. So officials at the club began to explore options, and one of those options was to sell the club. And in May 2014, a designated buyer was found: the Singaporean Peter Lim, who purchased 70.4% of the club. Now, it's important to note that Lim's arrival was met with great enthusiasm by fans and club officials alike. Touted as the club's saviour to those financial woes, the Singaporean came with big promises. These promises included a €200 million injection to stabilise finances, a commitment to completing the new stadium, and of course the ambition of returning Valencia to the top of Spanish football, and then onwards to the top of European competition. And this is exactly what the fans wanted to hear as they held up welcome Peter Lim signs to greet him into the city. Everything seemed to finally be on the up, even more so when under coach Nuno Espírito Santo, the team finished 4th in La Liga, securing a return to the Champions League. Hiring Nuno was also said to be one of Lim's demands when buying the club, so it could be argued at this stage fans wouldn't have been blamed for believing that this guy knew what he was talking about. But the next season, the 2015-16 season, didn't exactly start as was expected. The club won just 5 out of its opening 13 La Liga fixtures and failed to qualify from the Champions League group stages, so the pressure was already on Nuno. Add in Alvaro Negreiro's public criticism of Nuno's tactics, and you had a recipe for disaster. Nuno dramatically announced his resignation in late November, but Peter Lim had a now infamous solution up his sleeve. That solution was the Englishman Gary Neville, and Neville himself isn't afraid to make light of the situation that he found himself in at Valencia. But the fans were prepared to let Neville have a chance. However, there were concerns amongst some fans who noticed that he was actually the co-owner of Salford City with Lim. Yes, that's right, they actually owned part of the same club, who in those days were in the proper non-league of English football. Adding that, and the fact Neville had no managerial experience at that level, and no Spanish language skills, that suggested that something may not work. But Lim said he picked Gary not because he was a good friend, but because of his football knowledge. Look, no one can deny Neville's wealth of knowledge in the game, and his trophy cabinet as a player speaks for that. That's not what we're here to do. We're just here to say that the Valencia fans may have had a point when they suggested that the ingredients that we talked about beforehand may not have exactly made for the best situation. And following a string of poor results, Neville and Valencia endured an humiliating 7-0 defeat at the hands of Barcelona, which the Englishman often cites as his lowest moment. And by March 2016, after 28 games in charge and sitting 14th in the league after 11 losses, Lim decided that he'd made the wrong decision. And while this is one of the most notorious moments between Lim and Valencia, it wouldn't be the last situation where he let go of a manager. And at this point in the story, it must be said that building work in the stadium was still completely stopped, and there was no signs that that was going to start anytime soon. By the end of 2016, Valencia had gone through 4 managers. Yes, the club really had hired and sacked 2 further managers in just that year, while Salvador Gonzalez had taken on the interim reins on 2 occasions. He was finally handed the permanent job in January 2017, but by June of that year he had left the role. But his replacement, Marcelino, did actually improve fortunes. In the 2018-29 season, he actually managed to guide the team to 4th place in the table, a Europa League semi-final, and, in unlikely circumstances, a Copa del Rey victory. It marked a remarkable turnaround for the club's fortunes, and maybe, just maybe, could have turned around the relationship between Lim and the fans, which was really starting to splinter at this time. But like any theme in this story, that wasn't going to be the case. In September 2019, Lim dramatically sacked Marcelino as the manager and his sporting director after they publicly criticised him. Both of these figures were seen as key architects behind the victories of the previous season. But for Lim, public criticism just marked a step too far for him. But Marcelino fired back at Lim and said he was sacked because of his ambition and success of winning the Copa del Rey. His next 2 replacements both left the club within the space of the next year. That meant that since Lim had taken over in 2014, we were at 2020 at this stage, the club had had 6 managers. Not exactly the marker of stability. And now this is where things really went downhill for the fans. And let's interject here, the stadium had still not been finished and work had still not even started. After having seen the criticism of her dad, Peter Lim's daughter lashed out at protesting Valencia supporters on Instagram, saying the club is ours and we can do anything with it. This of course made Valencia fans absolutely livid. But despite all of this, Lim was actually seen at some of the games. In 2019 he attended 10 games throughout the calendar year. I know there's some owners that would go to a lot more, but given the fact he split his time between Singapore and Valencia, you could let him off on that fact. Not every club owner goes to every game. But that would all dramatically change when on the 15th of December 2019, Lim left the Mestalla Stadium and Valencia, and we're in 2025 now, and Lim has not been seen in the city or at the stadium. Having effectively lost interest in the club himself, Peter Lim enlisted the help of other family members to help run the club. But given his daughter's infamous attack on fans, this didn't exactly do much. So with Peter Lim effectively leaving the club in the hands of his family members, the club found it difficult to bounce back. New manager Javi Garcia took on the manager's job but was given no support to sign new players. This meant they had to integrate young youth players into the team. But of course, without that natural proven ability and experience in the Liga, this didn't favour them all too well. It was also decided that club captain Dani Parejo had to be sold to help the club's finances. But it wasn't so much the selling of Parejo, it was more the club that they sold him to, Villarreal. And for those who don't know the geography of the clubs in Spain, Villarreal is very, very close to Valencia. It's in the same autonomous area of Valencia, the Comunidad de Valencia. But Valencia have historically seen themselves as the bigger club. So to sell to a club essentially like your smaller neighbours, not a disrespect to Villarreal, just saying that's how they view them in Valencia, it would have been seen as a significant step backwards for the club, who just a few years earlier really thought that they could push forward and build themselves up as a major force in Spanish football once again. But that wasn't actually seen as the worst financial decision taken during that period, because star youngster Ferran Torres was sold to Manchester City, but for a price that was viewed much less than his market value, almost in a rush to get rid of him to improve the finances. At least that's how the fans saw it. And it really was confirmation that the club's financial woes looked in dire straits. They actually sold a string of players to make 85 million euros to help balance the books. This came alongside news that since Lim had taken over, the club had accrued debts of 300 million euros. This was, of course, in less than a decade, and having sold some of their best key players, it's no surprise that their form has dropped ever since. But once again, in the Copa del Rey, their fortunes seem to be in stark contrast to this financial woe, and they actually reached the final playing Real Betis. But unfortunately for Valencia fans, they lost that final. Given though the financial situation they were in and the fact that they were playing with many academy players, it was a great achievement, and Peter Lim wasn't in La Cartuja for the final that night. As of 2025, since that night in Sevilla, the club has really been on a downward spiral, going multiple years without European football, threatening relegation battles, and just an overall lack of quality in their squad. This has most recently been seen by the 7-1 drubbing at the hands of Barcelona. It also seems that Lim has just completely given up on the club, even if it was just to regain the finances that he would say that he's lost while owning the club. He just seems to not care anymore, and I think that's what the fans' gripe is. As for the fans, they have run years of protest campaigns against Lim's ownership, the most popular being the slogan, "Lim, go home." Fans in London even rebranded the road where the Singaporean embassy can be found to Lim Out Crescent. And back in Valencia, fans regularly hold protests outside the ground. But this has led to some issues. Before their first match of 2025, a fan group stated that they should hold a protest against Lim and the club's directors. This protest would involve them not going into the match for the first 19 minutes of the game. You've seen these kind of ones before. The fans leave the stadium empty and then come in and hold a protest. However, when the game kicked off and those protesting fans were outside, an altercation began with police. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of who started what or what happened, but all you can say is that fans of a club having an altercation with the police, riot police at that, is not a good look for the club, especially when they're just inside playing against the current La Liga champions. When this video is being released, Valencia currently face another battle to avoid relegation. It's starting to feel that unless something dramatic changes, the prospect of that relegation is more a question of when rather than if. And for Valencia fans, there does remain the hope that ownership of the club will change hands and they can avoid that dreaded drop to the Segunda Division. Now, this is a new style of video that I'm trialing on this channel. Of course, many people would probably subscribe to me from my time in Argentina and the videos that I made, especially in Uruguay as well, in South America. But, of course, I don't live in Argentina, I don't live in South America, I don't even live in Spain, but I was thinking about ways of trying to make videos and keep this channel going. And one of the things that I thought was that people seem to really enjoy the stories behind clubs. You know, where they're talking about the story of why Ferro is a club with Irish roots, how Independiente has Scottish roots. But it's those stories that I think people are interested in hearing. And as well, I love making them. I love researching them. I love just finding out about, hey, why has this club got a random connection to somewhere in England? Or why has this club got a connection to somewhere in Italy, say? Like there's clubs in Argentina and Spain that have connections. Why does this club share colours with this other club in the Spanish-speaking footballing world? I'm going to try and make more of the videos in this style, but I would like your help on that. I want to know what videos you'd like to be made, what videos you don't really enjoy, what I could add to the videos and what style I could do the videos. Really just want to hear your input on this. Like I say, this is a channel for everyone. I feel like we are building slowly a community. I do this channel in my spare time essentially, so I can't do videos like on a daily basis, but I try and do videos which really capture my eye. Like in this video, I saw Valencia were doing poorly, so I thought, let's do a video on that, let's bring that to the channel. But yeah, literally any advice, what you think works, what you think doesn't, just drop me a comment or drop me a message on Instagram or an email. I'd be really interested to hear what you have to say. And if you've got any stories that you think I should tell, well, fire them to me as well. I'll see what I can do. That is the video done. Let's see what happens to Valencia in the coming months. And as we always say here, nos vemos in the next video.